Greetings, fellow fans of Star Trek, and welcome to Captain's Yacht. As we depart planet Earth for the 24th century, a few things to point out. Don't forget to tune in to the last part of each video, in which Scholar Beta and me, Captain Kanaka, will issue a special kind of Star Trek assignment for you all. All you gotta do is submit it through the comments, and who knows, you might get a special A+ commendation. With that said, let's board the Captain's Yacht and see what we're talking about today.
Welcome, fans of Star Trek, to this very special episode of the Captain's Yacht, the podcast that takes you on a tour of the next generation episode by episode. However, this week we have a very special trajectory, a very special course plotted, and we will be briefly reviewing the successes and the not-so-successes of the first season of Star Trek Picard. I am your co-host and co-captain at Scholar Beta on all things social media, and I am hanging out with my co-host, friend, and co-captain of this podcast, Captain Kanaka. Welcome, my friend.
Yeah, glad to be here. I'm glad we get to do this special journey. This has been a long time coming. I've been waiting a long time for this day.
Excellent. Yes, me too. Hey, just a reminder out there to our fans, this is a podcast put together by two teachers. We're hanging out. We're trying to figure out the best way to do podcasting so we can get some of these ideas in front of our students. Our goal is to really practice experiential learning. We want kids to jump out there, get messy, put together a podcast, learn on the fly, learn from doing. And we're trying to get away from just, hanging out behind a textbook, taking a bunch of notes and then striking out. So again, this is an experiential podcast. We're grateful for all the folks who have continued to come along on this journey. And Captain, we've got a new segment we're going to be doing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm really excited about this. Thank you very much, Scholar Beta. So at the end of each segment, or if you're watching the light version of each episode, the end of the video, we have a special activity planned for you, our dear audience, to complete and submit via the comments a special Star Trek themed assignment that's related to something that we talk about. In a classic episode, there's 3 assignments. If you're watching this on the light version, it's just 1 assignment per video. It could be something from creating a meme. It could be something from creating a character, pitching a show, all those sorts of things. But how you submit or turn in your homework is by typing up something in the comments. Then, when the next episode comes around, we will give our A+ commendations, where either you, Scholar Beta, or me will call out a very special or a gold standard A+ assignment, and we talk about it briefly before we start recording. So if you're interested in that, please submit your homework and we'll get it graded and we'll see what we think about it. So I'm really looking forward to that. And with that said, this is the first episode of a special mini-series on Star Trek Picard. We actually have 3 planned. And that means this batch of episodes or batch of videos, if you're watching the light version, is 1. We're going to be examining characters the next episode. And the final episode, we'll be talking about general arc and plot construction. So with that in mind, Scholar Beta, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, just 2 other things really quickly. Spoilers ahead, my friends. By boarding the Captain's Yacht with us and going on this journey, you understand that we are going to be spoiling the entire first season of Star Trek Picard. If you haven't watched it, probably a good time to pause this review. Go check out those 10 episodes. We'll see you in about 5 hours. And then come on back and break it down with us over the next 3 weeks. But spoilers ahead, spoilers aplenty. I know even in today's episode, we're going to talk about the very end of the series as well. So just want to give you that heads up. And then one other really important thing, and I start almost every year in school talking about this. This is one of the most important things that will transform you as a student of literature, as a student of media, student of history, whatever it is. And that is, you can both love something and be critical of it at the same time. Okay, when you exercise this mentality, when you become a critic with a capital C, right, you break away from that tribalist mentality that a lot of us kind of grow up with. We become DC people or Star Wars people or Star Trek people. But honestly, what we really want to do at this point, I feel like, in our study of this, is we both want to love on Star Trek and we also want to be critical of it simultaneously. So just keep that in mind. as we move forward. It may sound in some X sections like we're, really hitting this thing hard, but in other ways, we're going to really be praising and lifting it up too. So with that said, Captain, anything else we need to say, or is it time to launch into the premise of the first season of Picard?
I think we're ready to launch, Scholar Beta. Make it so.
Here we go. So, season 1 of Picard. I'm going to try to explain the premise in a couple sentences. Here we go. Picard works on his family vineyard, now retired from Starfleet, but is thrust back into the action when Daj, a mysterious 20-something young woman, visits him begging for his help. Daj is killed off about 20 minutes later, and the next 9 episodes feature Picard searching for her twin, Soji, and helping her find her hidden homeworld before the Romulans do. Dun, dun, dun. Actually, when I wrote that premise, it's not so bad. It's not super complicated, yet as we're going to talk, things get a little complicated. The details matter, and it's about to get a bit murky. So, Captain, we got a big behind-the-scenes talk that we're both going to be chatting about. So let's get going on that. There's a lot going on because this is really some of the first time we've seen TNG crew in a minute. So let's talk about all the development that happened.
That's the deal there. To paraphrase the somewhat controversial intro to Enterprise, it's been a long road. That's the deal there. So, it has been a very long road. And Enterprise actually comes up in our examination here. So,
excellent, yeah.
Yeah, so you have what I categorize the early 2000s to literally this year, a sort of prequel trap into which the Star Trek franchise had spiraled. So in the early 2000s, low box office returns for the next generation movies and a thinning mythos forced Paramount and later CBS All Access into this, I call it a prequel trap, where they could only fund projects based on easily recognizable characters and stories. And you can see that with the Discovery. This is one of the reasons why Discovery starts in the Kirk era, even though the modern season rather, starts in the 32nd century or some such. It starts there because of the prequel trap, and you also got the J.J. Abrams movies there too. Scholar Beta, what is your opinion on all that?
Okay, so at first I wasn't quite sure what you meant by the prequel trap. I'm grateful for that explanation. You're absolutely right. From a marketing standpoint, what were they going to do? Were they going to try to tell us about Kira and Neelix, or were they going to try to tell us about, Kirk and Spock? Who do you think people recognize more? So I guess on the one hand, I understand that. I was thinking more, there's this prequel trap concept where it's like, when you use a prequel as material for your story, you can really risk removing all the tension from the story because we already know how it's going to end. So if you want to tell a story in that world set before the main events of, say, your flagship series, you can definitely still do that by examining other characters. And I know Star Trek does do this a bit here and a bit there, but I just like to point out 2 very different examples. One prequel is called The Hedge Knight from the A Song of Ice and Fire universe that George R.R. Martin created. The Hedge Knight and those series of novels, excellent. Takes place in the world, adds to the world. We have a little cameo from characters we've heard of, but we don't follow them. So it's not like we know what's going to happen to them immediately, So that's a very successful example, I'd say. And then a non-successful example, I would say, would be the Star Wars prequels, because we already know what's going to happen to Anakin. Even though we see him as a little kid and, he's essentially a different character, ultimately we know how it's all going to end up. So, like, any tension where you try to put his life in danger or make him look like a really good guy, we just know he's going to live to be Darth Vader, and we know he's not going to be a good guy, So it's like, I thought that's where you were going with the prequel trap. We're obviously thinking of different things, but prequels are tricky, friends. They are tricky, and it takes some masterful storytelling. So that's what I wanted to elaborate. Thank you for bringing that up.
Awesome, and I want to point out that somewhere in between the Hedge Knight in episode 1, you have Prometheus and Alien Covenant, where they tried to go one way with it. They tried to make it more Hedge Knight, but there are definitely some episode 1 Star Wars prequel elements thrown in there too. So
yes,
definitely, that's a really good point on that. Thank you for sharing that, Scholar Beta. So going into my thesis about the prequel trap mentality, if this goes even before Nemesis, actually, Scott Bakula, who plays Captain Jonathan Archer in the Star Trek Enterprise TV prequel, originally said he turned down the lead role because he didn't want to be, quote, another Trek captain. Then they countered with, you'll be the first one, and that's what got him to sign on. That's the deal there. So this prequel trap, in terms of what gets funded and what gets moving in a production sense, predates Star Trek Nemesis. So then you get the total decline of the Star Trek universe with the Star Trek Nemesis, both creatively and thematically, but more importantly, because Hollywood is a business, in terms of box office returns. So, so this is kind of interesting because maybe you members of our audience may not know this, but Paramount had essentially greenlit a follow-up to Nemesis, and a script was written and a concept was in place even before Nemesis came out. This original draft of the story, the original Star Trek 11, not the J.J. Abrams universe, not anything else, was allegedly entitled Star Trek Federation. And this is how it would have unfolded. A rip in the space-time continuum would have brought all of Star Trek's villains together to attack the Federation. Everything. V'ger, the probe from Voyager, Khan, Shinzon, of course the Borg. Too much to handle for one person. So, as a result of that, Jean-Luc Picard is forced to team up with the crew of Deep Space Nine, Voyager, while also traveling back in time to retrieve characters from every chronologically previous show, including Data, they revived Data, Kirk and Spock, because who knows how to defeat Khan better than those two people, and Captain Archer from Enterprise. I guess there's some Xindi influence there. This was the idea. This was supposed to be the original Star Trek 11. So what do you think about that, Scholar Beta?
I don't know if you heard me, but a big sigh. You know, I am not grateful for Nemesis. I hate that movie. It's terrible, straight up. I don't like to sound like a total just like I was talking about tribalism earlier, but I really dislike that movie. But I dislike this premise a lot too. You know, to be honest, this sounds awful because in a single TNG film, my biggest problem, and even in the TOS films, you know, it's really hard to give everyone their share. You know, who gets knocked out of the TNG movies? Crusher first, Troy second, you know, LaForge third. It's always like that. They always get shoved to the side, and those are excellent characters. It's always the Patrick Stewart, Brent Spiner, and to some degree Jonathan Frakes, so he gets to direct, so it's less about his character, you know? So how are they going to quadruple the size of the crew and still give people their screen time, their time to be a character, to be anything more than a 3D, you know, a three-dimensional or one-dimensional cutout, whatever I'm trying to say? I just don't see that happening. To me, that's kind of a stinky garbage idea, in my opinion. But you know, hey, who knows? Who knows?
It's the same problem with Infinity War in the Avengers universe.
Okay.
Because when they announced the Avengers Infinity War, I was sitting there going, how could you give these characters basically the same criteria that you pointed out? How can you give them screen time and active agency to the story? And when I first read the script, I was thinking about this Avengers Endgame-like scenario where everybody comes together for this climactic battle, and then Captain Picard sits there and goes, Avengers! Engage! And you have a major battle about that, and lots of explosions. Yes, Scholar Beta.
Okay, so that is interesting. Two things about that. You know, if Data had 3 of his own movies, and then was in a you know, or if Crusher had 2 of her own films, can you imagine? They can't even get a Black Widow film. We'll never get a Beverly Crusher film or a Keanu Reeves film or, you know, or anything like that. But if those people had that screen time, then it kind of works, you know, because in your own film, you get a lot of your screen time. And then in this, you're an ensemble, and so you're going to take some hits. But, like, if you never get that screen time to begin with, it's really tough to, like, feel like that character is a character at all. And then can you imagine a bunch of, you know, retired actors really, you know, fighting on screen together? That just seems...
It seems insane.
I love it, but it's terrible at the same time, you know?
Absolutely, and that's the thing too. As much as we have our feelings about Picard, at least it's not that. At least
Yes.
it's not this movie.
Yes.
So with that in mind, this project died horribly after Nemesis's dismal box office return. So instead, it's worth pointing out that this is probably the what am I trying to say? This is probably Paramount's attempt at saluting 40 years of Star Trek being on television, being in movie form, just the Star Trek universe in general. Because if you look at the chronology, this would have entered pre-production in 2003. And because of the logistics of getting everybody together and filming, you're looking at least a 2 to 3 year production, which means it would come out in 2006, which is the 40th anniversary for Star Trek, just the Star Trek universe in general. So we didn't get that. Yeah. Instead, we got, instead of a mega Trek crossover movie that would have easily rivaled the Avengers, we got a History Channel special narrated by Leonard Nimoy, in which Paramount auctioned off 40 years worth of props in their warehouse via Christie's auction house in New York. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's what we got. That's how Paramount.
What a substitute.
Yes, what a substitute. So, that's the deal there. During Star Trek's 40th anniversary, though, it's worth pointing out that several Trek projects were pitched and in some cases were in pre-production that would take place after the Voyager Nemesis era. However, and this ties into my prequel trap thesis, they were unceremoniously canceled. Worth pointing out there. So, this one right here, and I'm going to do extremely light summaries of these shows. There's a lot of evidence here. There's a lot of character analysis. There's even scripts for this one right here, Star Trek Final Frontier, which was pitched in 2006. It's an animated series, which actually has concept art and character outlines online. It takes place in the 25th century, the late 25th century, and the galaxy is wrecked because warp drive is completely unattainable. So, yeah. So the crux of the show, the main thesis of this show is, how will the Federation keep true to its values when the technological foundation of its society is gone? So,
I got a question for you. Is this like warp drive is unattainable because of like the issues in force of nature? You know, where if they go too fast, they're ripping holes in space-time? Or is it unattainable because of like what they're doing in Discovery Season 3? I don't know if we want to spoil that or something like that, but what do we know why it's unattainable, or is it just like MacGuffin unattainable? It doesn't matter why.
I do. It's a little mix of both.
Okay.
But if you want us, you the audience, want us to do a Lost World of Star Trek episode in which we, or maybe even a series, there are a lot of shows that have been pitched, and even movies and cartoons that have been pitched over the years, gained some traction, and then were unceremoniously canceled. So with this situation, it's a combination of a couple different things. There's even terrorism that's involved. No. Yeah, involving warp drive, and I'm just going to leave it at that for the interest of time. So that being said, it's the worst case scenario for forces of nature combined with terrorism. So that's definitely worth pointing out there.
I like it.
So yes, this show actually had scripts. They actually did table reads, and then they killed it.
Oh, well.
So, yeah. Then you get, the same time, Bryan Singer's Star Trek Federation. Now, this is different from the other Star Trek Federation, which was Star Trek 11. This is a live-action spin-off.
A series.
Yep, it's a series.
Got it.
So, yeah, in this live-action spin-off, it's the year 3000. The Federation has completely collapsed, and the remnants of Starfleet build a new USS Enterprise, and I jokingly call it the Enterprise Z or Z because it's the year 3000. How many flippin' Enterprises do they build? Exactly. And it would be under command of a distant descendant of Kirk, and the purpose would be to rebuild the utopia based on Star Trek's promises. And I see you have notes on this, Scholar Beta, so what are your opinions on that?
Okay, my first gut is no. because again, get your dystopia out of Star Trek. What are you doing? Why are you taking the one science fiction franchise that is forward-looking, positive, and why are you trying to corrupt that? You got it. Bryan Singer, if you want to put your fingers into X-Men and make that all dark, oh wait, you did that already. Say like the people do this already in other franchises. Why do we got to do this with everything? Man, I almost want a time machine where I can time travel back to Christopher Nolan and let him know what a mistake it's going to be to make dark, gritty Batman films, which are going to make everything else have a dark, gritty tone from here on out. Okay, I digress, but I'm saying no to this idea. Let's get back to a model civilization where our people are excellent role models, and then we go out into the galaxy and we resolve conflict. That's interesting,
I absolutely
yes.
agree, and I absolutely agree, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you are going to do your take on how when we do our plot construction episode where we examine these issues, but from a way that's utopian in nature. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yes.
So, with all that in mind, oh yeah, so do I. These shows failed because they lack the recognizable brand name and concept the studio needs to properly fund them. And that's where it begins and ends with that. You could argue, and for those of you who have taken a look at Star Trek Discovery Season 3, you could point out the parallels between these kinds of pitches and what's happening in Star Trek Discovery. So at least you see it in some form, perhaps not the originally intended form. So keep that in mind. I am going to point out that Picard succeeded. I'm teaching the Civil War in class right now, so I succeed versus succeed.
Succeed, yeah.
Picard succeeded in breaking the prequel trap because of Jean-Luc Picard's household name, which in theory had enough financial security in which you could make a story about him because it's 20 years since we as fans have seen him. And that's what I'm going to argue is what broke the prequel trap for Paramount. What do you think about that, Scholar Beta?
Yeah, I mean, not only that, everyone knows the bald captain, right? Like on the most basic level, but also, Patrick Stewart, he's been working, and he's been in Hollywood for a minute too. Like, not just Shakespeare, not just his theater stuff. He was in all the Marvel stuff, which even though he didn't have, like the most front role in those X-Men films, he had a bunch of them, so like that just kind of renewed his screen presence, his bankability, all that good stuff. I honestly think more than Picard, it was Patrick Stewart, Sir Patrick, that is that what they were banking on, so yeah, I agree with that. I think, if I'm gonna make something that's not TOS, Kirk Spock related, I pretty much have to go with Picard. I can't even tell you who would be the next most recognizable character. Kirk, Spock,
That's a good
Picard.
point.
I'm not even sure who's next. Jane, Seven? I don't even know.
That's a good point. So you bring up Patrick Stewart and why he's crucial. First of all, you can't have a Picard show without Picard. So
no.
How do you get Patrick Stewart back on the roll? Well, at first, it was a really hard sell. Patrick Stewart turned down the first offer. He said that he felt that he had given everything he could to the character and the series, and it's not important or not. He's not able to do anything more.
Yeah.
So that's the deal there. Then they came by his house. Akiva Goldsman
knocked on his door. Hey, you home?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman knocked on his door, said, "Hey, are you home?" And according to Patrick Stewart in interviews, these two showrunners were so polite and enthusiastic that Patrick Stewart asked them to resubmit their pitch in writing, which makes me wonder if it was enthusiastic but not coherent, which could be the first telltale sign of what the show ended up being, or what. But that's the deal there. So he took a look at the pitch. He asked to be executive producer and have some creative control. And in my head, somebody backed up to his house with a dump truck load of money.
Yes.
And that's how we get Picard. And also, being executive producer, in addition to having creative control, you also get an extra paycheck. So it might have had something to do with that too. What are your opinions on that, Scholar Beta?
All right, here we go, fans. Remember, I love Patrick Stewart and I love Jean-Luc Picard, so I'm gonna love him, keep him in my heart. I'm gonna be critical at the same time. But to be honest, making Patrick Stewart the executive producer, I think, is the beginning of the doom of this show. Doom. And here's why. I think that Patrick Stewart is an incredible actor. I think his range is excellent. Go watch the TNG episode Sarek. I don't even think you need any other evidence after that. You know, I'm pretty sure that basically seals it for me right there. It's full range. And I think when actors begin to take over screenwriting jobs, they want to put their character more centrally involved. They want to make their character as centrally involved as possible. And I think they can lose sight that Picard is part of a greater narrative and isn't the narrative itself. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but I got one other example, and that would be, look what happened to Nemesis when Brett Spiner was given a writing credit. I love Brett Spiner, an amazing actor. But Nemesis is awful, and they put it in the hands of mediocre producers and directors. I hate to say, but it's true. People that didn't have a long track record and had no track record with Star Trek. And then they said, Brett Spiner, what do you want to do? And you know, he made it about Data, and now he has a clone before, and it's just, I don't know. That just really I just don't see it. I think if Patrick Stewart or if Picard was written by someone who understood the character Picard, you know, I think Patrick Stewart has quotes where he says he doesn't know where Patrick Stewart starts and Picard ends. You know, he's talked about that in the past, and it's like, yeah, so let's have an outside perspective on that. I think that will really help you out. And I feel bad for him. The guy did 7 years of this, 7 years of Picard in 4 movies, and like, yeah, that's a lot of your life. And he does want to get away, and he does want to do other things. So it's like, oh, he's put in a tough situation, you know? And I think the dump truck of money, plus you don't have to be in a uniform. You can tell us what you want on this. Oh, we'll make it about Brexit. I think that just all dooms it. I think we should let the writers write it. You know, actors can bring amazing things to performances. See Harrison Ford in The Empire Strikes Back. You know, they can totally lift up and elevate a performance, but also they can ruin a screenplay. See Brett Spiner in Nemesis. Last thing I'll say on this with Patrick Stewart, because I do love the man, but there's this quote that Picard in character says. He says, "I never really cared for science fiction. I guess I just didn't get it." Now, this line haunts the show, in my opinion, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to laugh and be like, ha ha ha, you're Patrick Stewart, you're Picard, of course you like science fiction, or is this an admission? You know, is this like we are admitting that we gave an executive producer and writing credit job, or not writing credit, but an executive producer role to someone who doesn't get this show. You know, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. So, hey, you know, I think if it were in an ideal, if I was, you know, ideally, we would let people who understood Trek write Trek, and people who understood acting, you know, make these parts come alive. I think there's roles for writers and actors, and for a reason. I don't know. Maybe that's just too simpleton. I apologize if it is too simpleton, but that's my take on it. That's where I'm seeing Patrick Stewart in 2019-20, and I'm wondering about this.
I definitely hear you on that, and my reaction to that "I don't get science fiction" line was laughter. I guess it was comic relief, but the other perspective definitely shines through there too. Another thing to point out here, folks, is you have a case of musical producers. You have several showrunners, several producers. No one knows what's going on there. There's been many jokes about how when you look at the credits of Star Trek Discovery and Picard, there are more producers credited than actors.
Wow.
Yeah, there's like 20 odd producers every time you see the credits. And here's another thing to point out here. This might be why. When Patrick Stewart made his announcement on August 4th, 2018, very special day for me, I'll explain later, the materials seem to promote that either Alex Kurtzman or Akiva Goldsman of Batman and Robin fame would be the showrunner. Now, if you want classic science fiction, you want the guy who did Batman and Robin, my God.
Oh my, have they seen that film? Okay.
Exactly. So then in the summer of 2019, it was announced that Pulitzer Prize winner Michael Chabon? I
don't have any idea. I probably should have looked that up before we recorded. Oh, well. Yeah.
I've heard it on air as Chabon. So would be the showrunner. And then as of this taping, Michael Chabon has left the show. And Terry Matalas, a producer for Star Trek Voyager and Enterprise, has been pegged as the current showrunner. Now, it's also worth pointing out here, folks, that the viewership dropped by about 50%. What was that?
I was going to say, at least we get a Voyager showrunner on there. That's something, you know. Yep. I like that better. I will talk about, and it is Shea Bon. Like, I just looked it up. Shea, as in Shea Stadium. A little baseball reference for you, my friend. I know you love that sport. And then Bon, like Bon Jovi. Shea Bon, you're absolutely right. I'm going to talk about Michael Shea Bon a little bit later. I read his stuff when I was in high school, a long time ago. Some of his short fiction and Cavalier and Clay. Great writer. I think he just was not used in the proper way, you know. As a showrunner, your job is to be an encyclopedia of Star Trek, man. I mean, that's a big job. Anyways, yeah, I think that's actually kind of encouraging to see that change your perspective. But I'm sorry, before I cut you off, when you were talking about viewership, what's going on with that? What you learned about that?
The viewership dropped a lot. It's difficult to tell because CBS All Access will not give out official statistics. But in case,
I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why. But in the case of live broadcasts, because internationally it is shown on television, in Canada it dropped by 45%. So
there you go.
That's the deal there. So with that in mind, we have reached the point of our discussion here where we will give an assignment, our first assignment. So here is the assignment that I am giving to you all, or rather we are giving to you all right now. So, in the spirit of Star Trek Federation, the movie, not the TV show, I want you all, our audience members, to construct your Star Trek dream team of your favorite characters, including the captain, the crew, the starship, and the premise. And write it down in the comments below. So with that said, here's my pitch. Picture an undiscovered country era Constitution class vessel, that's one of my favorite vessels ever, captained by Picard, with Kira Nerys as second in command, Dr. McCoy as the ship's surgeon, Charles Trip Tucker as the engineer, and 7 of 9 as science officer. And the premise of the show is them trying to figure out the mystery surrounding this rip in the space-time continuum that brought them all together. Now, I need to point out, not all franchises need to be represented, but for the purposes of modeling, I definitely pointed that out. Scholar Beta, what's your show?
I failed at representing multiple. I failed at representing multiple franchises, my bad. Welcome to the bridge. You'll notice we have Captain Tuvok, Commander Data XO, Commander Ro at Ops, Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge, and a new counselor taking Deanna Troy's place. We have Guinan, who actually auditioned for that or wanted to apply for that job many years back. But this crew is tasked with repairing the damage of the Dominion War, brought together by that space-time continuum. They are tasked with, beginning in 2378, on an experimentally retrofitted Constellation class starship with repairing damage done during the Dominion War. Sorry, that was kind of a weak. I did a bad job on that assignment. I don't think I'll be getting the special A+. But hey, I'm curious what people come up with. Let's see what y'all come up with, and I'm excited to read the comments. What's your dream team?
What's the dream team? Exactly. So with that in mind, we will read our favorite pitches in the next episode, the next full episode, the next 90-minute episode. So if you want to see if you got an A+ commendation, take a look at point 1 if you're watching the light videos, point 1 of our episodes, because that's when we give our A+ commendations. This is Captain Kanaka speaking. On behalf of my esteemed colleague at Scholar Beta, we hope you've enjoyed this deluxe version of Captain's Yacht, a Star Trek podcast. This is a podcast done by 2 inner-city high school teachers learning how to make a podcast so we can teach those skills to our students in the fields of social studies and English language arts. If you like what you see and like to see more, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and as both me, Captain Kanaka, and my colleague Scholar Beta are new to the podcasting realm and the video production realm, please give us any feedback you deem appropriate. We could definitely use it. So, with that said, live long and prosper, e malama pono, and see you next time.